And we're live. What is up? We're back. This is the first general show of 2023. We took a few weeks off with the holidays and just traveling and doing fam jam stuff. How you guys doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Doing well.
Good.
Ready for 2023?
Yeah.
A lot of exciting things ahead. Yeah.
Jaron, I got to ask you, what the hell's going on in Mexico with this El Chapo and the cartel war against the government?
I'm
glad any of that pop up in Mexico City.
Mexico City, where I live, haven't really, even historically during the drug war, didn't really see too much violence around here. Although I was in Guadalajara at the time. Guadalajara got hit really bad, and about that point is when I got the hell out of here my first time around. So it's starting to echo kind of what happened in 2008 timeframe or so when they came down. They introduced Plan Mexico. They gave the Mexican government a bunch of money to go against the cartels, and it effectively almost created a civil war. So we're all kind of holding our breath here to make sure that doesn't happen again. But seeing in the news and seeing the memes, they arrested El Chapo's son. They brought him here to Mexico City. He's now in Mexico State at the same prison that El Chapo escaped from twice. So we'll see what happens there. And then sure enough, Biden and Trudeau are in town this next week. So I'm sure historically, whenever they have those kind of meetings here in Mexico, they introduce some plan that always screws over Mexico. It either devalues the peso or it injects a bunch of cash in the Mexican government so they can go after the cartels, and then it just erupts in violence. So we're all kind of like, oh no, we've seen this before. We know where this is going to lead. Trudeau and Biden are both idiots. I know that we all know that. So, and then Mexico has a socialist president too. He's not as bad as I thought he would be. I think he's more ineffective than actively bad like a Biden or Trudeau. But like, oh no, we have 3 North American socialist leaning leaders, and they just did this whole little operative to get El Chapo's son right before their conference here in Mexico City. So we're just holding our breaths. I've seen this before, and the last time around it was not fun being down here when that shit kicked off.
Is it as tense now as what it was last time? Because I've seen footage of them burning buses, shooting at planes with 50 cals, all kinds of weird stuff.
That's in Sinaloa, so it's usually regionalized. So the Sinaloa cartel, it's based in Sinaloa. Culiacan is the capital city of that state. That's where they have a lot of that stuff.
Manzanillo or something like that too?
Manzanillo is in a different state. That's further down. That's south of Puerto Vallarta. But when I lived here before, it kind of went in waves. So whenever there was turf type wars, so Guadalajara was immune to it for a while. Monterrey up in the north, which is a really nice city, got hit really bad. And then when I was down here, it was later, like 2010, I think 2011, when Guadalajara got hit. I remember I was there when they had an operative. They took out the capo, or the head guy. His name was El Barbi, because he was a white guy with fair European looking characteristics. And my buddy and I, we were up on the roof of our house playing dominoes, drinking beer, just watching as the whole city erupted in violence. And it's pretty typical the way they do it. That happened in Tijuana a few months ago, where they bomb out buses to set up road blockades, and they do coordinated attacks against the police and military. And when I witnessed it in Guadalajara, helicopters were coming in and they're rappelling down and grabbing people. So my buddy and I were sitting on the roof watching or playing dominoes. We're like, God, this looks like Afghanistan. And I had foreign friends that this was back in the mid 2000s that had been deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. They're like, yeah, this is pretty much, what a war zone looks like. I'm like, well, since I can choose where I want to live, I choose not to live here anymore. So fingers crossed that's not going to happen. This time around, I'm a little more mobile. I like Mexico City, but I have my life set up to where I don't have to live here forever. So I'm still a minimalist enough to where in 2 days I can get the hell out of here and go on to wherever I need to go. So fingers crossed, nothing becomes of it. It's a one-off thing, but you never know the way politics work these days.
So, Jaron, essentially, you're getting to see season 4 of Narcos without having to watch it on Netflix.
Yeah, I've still never watched Narcos. When my friends in the States like, dude, you got to watch Narcos. I'm like, no, I lived down here during that first time. I don't want to watch it. It got pretty scary.
I don't want to see that again.
Yeah. I thought there was just like a general understanding. We won't bother any of the population or the tourists if you just leave us alone. But it seems like that like agreement has sort of been cast aside for some reason, huh?
That's exactly how it is. So when I first moved to Guadalajara, it was in 2006. It was a really peaceful town. And I believe I'd done my research at the time too, that the murder rate was comparable to like your major European cities. And it felt like Europe. It was a really pretty town, really calm, really chill, thriving nightlife, thriving middle class. And then once it was our turn to get our wave in the drug violence, all the nightclubs closed. There was curfews, not government imposed curfews, but most people, like, the nights were dead. there's nothing going on. It just kind of sucked the life out of the city. So that's my understanding. That's the way I approach those things. If you run into those types of characters, just, hey, you stay in your lane, I stay in my lane, and that there is a general societal understanding. And I get really pissed off whenever the U.S. tries to meddle in Mexican affairs, because they always just fracture the society, and it's usually the civilian population that catches the bad end of that stick.
What's the drugs that they're fighting over? Is it coke or?
I have no idea. I think fentanyl is a big one now, though. A lot of drugs that come down here come from the U.S. Like all the marijuana here is from California. I think it's fentanyl going north. I think human trafficking is a big one nowadays. To be honest, I'm not really sure. I'm not in the drug thing too much, aside from a little weed here and there.
Got it. Yeah, I got a message here from 50. He said his computer crashed, so he'll be back.
There's an update from this guy called Johnny Mitchell.
Yeah.
That does the Connect. It's called. I just happened to listen to it.
Update on what exactly?
On what's happening in Mexico.
Oh, okay. What did they say?
Basically, he said that every 4 or 5 years, once one of the heads of the cartels grows too large, too powerful, too exposed, starts talking, posting, and being too public, they take him down, even though the government and everybody from the president down is bribed by these guys. At some point, they just get too big, and the Americans have to do something and push the Mexican government, and they need to do something about these guys. So somebody else just comes and takes their place. But it's all for showish, like.
It's all for political points, too. It's not an accident that it happened right before Biden's visiting the southern border in the U.S. for the first time, and before the North American Leader Summit here. I think it's early next week that's happening. Because I was supposed to go to the U.S. for business, and then you guys internally know one of the big companies I work for. They're like, hey, we need you in Mexico City, to like receive people as part of the whole thing going on.
What do you guys think of the war on drugs in general?
It's stupid. A war on intangible objects, I think, is stupid. War on terrorism, war on poverty, war on drugs. I wish we had a war on obesity, but we don't in the U.S. That would solve a lot of problems. But
no, we celebrate that.
Yeah. Hey, guys, Jaron, to that point, I just noticed this the other day when I got back from Europe and was out and about walking around, and I said, the same giant corporations that told you last month to gorge yourself, to stuff yourself with their alcohol and with their food, are all now selling you weight loss products and fitness products.
Oh, isn't it great?
So it is. So that's what plugged in means to me. They're catching you at both ends. They don't give a crap about you. All they care about is as long as you buy their crap, buy it in December and buy it in January.
Yeah, the worst part of the weight loss crowd is going to the gym in January, and it's crowded as fuck, and nobody knows what they're doing, and they're just slow. It's just a disaster in there in January. By the end of the month, it's pretty quiet though, because most of the fucking tryhards will quit by then.
Everyone's still out of town here, so the gym has been heaven this last week. There is nobody there except for like your avid gym goers. You'll see that if you go to the gym on like a Friday night or like late Saturday night. It's like the real gym guys are there, and like that's kind of like your core group. That's how it's been lately here. And then Irish on that, yeah, you'll notice that like if you ever quit smoking, like the smoking cessation products, those are always owned by like the Philip Morris Corporation, which is really funny. So they'll get you addicted on the cigarettes and then say, hey, you should quit smoking. It's really good for your health. But all of those products are still owned by the same tobacco companies.
What's your take, 50, on the whole drug war thing?
I don't know. You can be ultra libertarian on it and say, yeah, just let people do as they want. But then when it starts to, come to your town or affect people close to you, but we can talk about the drug war. But I think there's I can remember when I first took Percocet after I had a procedure, and I said to myself, when you have a headache or a pain and you take Tylenol and the pain just goes away, you're like an hour later, oh yeah, that headache's gone. When I first took this stuff, the pain went away, but I felt euphoric. I remember saying to my former brother-in-law at the time, I said, am I supposed to feel like this? Like this is dangerous. I said, like that I feel this good after taking something. He's like, oh yeah, there's no problem with this stuff. It's not addictive. That's a myth. And I remember hearing that from him around 2009. And I'm thinking, like, these guys produce this stuff en masse. They've done exactly what the cartels are doing. I copped onto this stuff on my own. Like, this is for pain, but suddenly I feel brilliant. And I was just like, this is dangerous. And again, it's like the war on whose drugs? The war on the cartels' drugs or the war on the pharmaceutical companies' drugs?
Yeah, they want you on their drugs. They want you on their prescriptions. They want you on their government issued pills and stuff. The problem is they can't earn any revenue off their stuff. So, you know, when I was a kid, they used to have ads, posters and TV ads, and they'd have like a frying pan that was scalding hot, like a cast iron pan, and they'd throw a couple eggs in it. They'd be like, "This is your brain," and then, you know, they cut to the eggs being dropped in there frying, and they'd say, "This is your brain on drugs," and that was a war on weed, right? And, you know, today in Canada, it's completely legal. Like the Canadian government's the biggest drug dealer of all times. They sell you your weed if you want it. You know, so their tune changes very rapidly when they legalize it and, you know, can monetize it and tax it. But still, we managed to have like the highest debt per capita. The government overspends more than what it takes in. It just doesn't solve any problems. I mean, I'm more of a libertarian. It's just like, look, if it's not hurting anybody or if it's not hurting, you know, like a large chunk of society in any way, shape, or form, then if you want to be a cokehead or a crackhead or whatever, fine, do it. But most people don't even touch the stuff, right? Like I know guys that have touched it like once, they'll be like, ah, fuck that. I'm not touching that stuff again because they realize that it's absolute trash. But there's some people that just make it like a lifestyle choice.
That's one thing. When everything's super chilled, the drug quality, it's usually not that good. It's kind of lackluster. But whenever there's competition in the marketplace and the cartels are going at each other and the U.S. government gets involved and starts sending money down here, it gets really good really fast, and it creates innovation in the market to where like things like fentanyl didn't exist. Like it always existed, but it wasn't like a big thing back the last time around with the Mexican drug war. So I think they know what they're doing. I always say that if I'm a normal guy, like just some dork on the internet behind a microphone, and I can see this stuff clearly, then obviously the powers that be know exactly what's going on. And again, I think it's all for political posturing and points. But if they were really serious about people not using drugs, they'd address the demand side in conjunction with the supply side, or focus more on the demand side, because it's largely a cultural thing. And a lot of these Latin countries, like, yeah, you'll go out to a club and like there'll be a guy selling coke in the bathroom, but you don't have a lot of drug addicts down here. It's kind of taboo. Like most people use it recreationally. Where in the US, there's a major drug problem, and that stems from a larger cultural problem. So if you want to fix the drugs, you fix the demand.
I mean, I would argue sugar is probably a more dangerous and addictive drug than anything else that's out on the marketplace right now that El Chapo is selling.
I happen to agree with that. You know, my obsession with food and cooking, and I hear this commercial on the radio regularly, and it's about you know Prilosec and all these acid reducing things.
Yeah,
and,
like for antacid, like Tums and things like that.
And if I was to paraphrase the commercial, it's like, take our product and you can still be a glutton as fuck. You can still eat your pizza and your chicken wings, and you can take this and you won't get heartburn. So what it's really doing is preventing you from the consequences of being gluttonous. So, you know, I had a lot of acid reflux and I took prescription meds, but, you know, I just read up on it and I stopped eating some of the crap that I was eating, and lo and behold, it went away. But
what was it that was causing the acid reflux?
With me, it's chocolate and red wine. If I take a combo of them, it just turns into a fucking furnace, and I'm like, it'll literally incapacitate me.
Yeah, red wine fucks with a lot of people. I remember I was dating this gal back in the day, and she used to guzzle red wine like it was going out of style. And, you know, I started drinking it too. And for some reason, like I just kept having these issues where I just couldn't fucking sleep, and I kept having like heartburn in the middle of the night. And as soon as I took out the booze, then I was just fine.
But again, it's quantity. Like if you're guzzling a lot of something, you're taking a lot of something. If you're eating after 7 p.m. at night and you have heartburn issues, it's going to affect you.
It will, yeah. Dragos, I wanted to ask you, what's the deal in Eastern Europe with the war on drugs? Like, how is that viewed over there? Because you're in Romania.
Well, actually, I just posted something in the private chat.
Yeah.
In Europe, there's a bit of a divided view on drugs, in the sense that in Portugal it had gotten out of control to the point where they had an opium epidemic. So what they did is that they decriminalized everything.
In Portugal?
And I think they had these places where you could go and get a shot safely, so that they make the stealing and the social aspect go away, right? because the problem with drugs is multi-pronged, right? If you as an individual get hurt or hurt yourself or something, that's one thing. But usually drugs.
This is the fact that you got to look
associated-
at right there,
Yeah.
right? Like that's an absolute fact of life.
And this is from the mayor of Amsterdam.
Yeah. And Amsterdam has pretty much everything legalized. You can hookers, booze, weed, whatever you want. Mushrooms.
It's not
even.
legalized, but it's not criminalized.
Right.
So it's in a gray area where they cannot prosecute you, but at the same time, it's not legal.
Right.
It's not within the law. It's just
Yeah.
not outside of the law.
Yeah.
In Romania, penalties are pretty harsh, like for just about everything. It's one of the places where it's harshest on drug users.
Mhm.
I mean, you can go to jail even if you have consumed something and are detected while driving.
It's the same thing here too.
Yeah.
Recent convert, what's up, buddy?
Oh, living the good life.
How you been? We haven't seen you in a while.
How have I been? Well,
Carving up the slopes, I know that.
a little bit of that. Some highs, some lows, bunch of different stuff happening, but overall moving in the right direction, up and to the right.
Good.
Got the divorce papers signed and filed with the court. Now we just wait for a final date to get a rubber stamp, which can be anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks. So waiting for the court date to come through. But otherwise, up and to the right.
Guys, by the way, on the topic of divorce, my Monday night Unplugged Alpha show at 8 p.m. Eastern is going to be on divorce, and I've got John Noble joining me, who's a family lawyer. So if you have questions about that, come in there during that show. There's a couple questions here in the chat, so let me just touch on a few of these. You said, what can anybody join and ask questions? We don't generally take call-ins on a general show. It's usually just the men chopping it up on whatever's going on in the world and catching up. But if you guys have anything you want us to touch on, you can drop it in the chat. Like we've got one over here. What are the benefits you found microdosing magic mushrooms, but basically psilocybin? For productivity, some people really find that it works. I've tried it quite a few times, and it can be useful. The dosing, can be hard to get right, though. I mean, it's usually somewhere between like 0.2 and 0.3, 0.35 grams. Depends on what part of the mushroom you're using, whether it's the stalk or like the top part. The top part's got more psilocybin, so something that's worth experimenting with if you've got issues with productivity or you think you might want to try it just to see what kind of results you get out of it. Does anybody else here use microdosing?
I've given it a shot. Rich, when you say productivity, what do you mean? Increased focus? Do you mean less distractions? Like what do you mean by productivity? Because I have some that I got from California, but I still find that the market's so gray and the quality control so crappy that I can't tell if there's anything happening or not. So I don't know if that's chalking it up to the quality or my own chemistry.
It can be a combination of both. Like I've generally found somewhere between 0.25 and 0.35 is sufficient for microdosing for productivity and focus. But I've used like 0.35 and I've been like, okay, this is way stronger than I thought it would be. Like you're kind of on like a mini trip, very, very light one. I mean, you don't, hallucinate or anything like that, but you're clearly not just microdosing at that point. So yeah, like the source has to be reliable. You want to source from the same spot so that when you're weighing it out and you're doing the microdosing sort of schedule, then you get the productivity benefits rather than, that plus, I suppose.
Yeah, when it comes to dosing, Rich nailed it. You always want to have a consistent source, so that way you can benchmark your dosing and your effects against themselves. I know in California they sell them like in chocolate bars. I don't know if they sell them in pills. Down here, like it's actually pretty common because they're really into spiritual stuff here. So I just get these guys. They're 0.25 per capsule. So for productivity, one capsule. If I'm going out like to a music festival and I kind of want to be in somewhat of an altered state, so it feels equivalent to like 2 or 3 beers. I'll take 2 of them, so it's 0.5 or half a gram there. So it really depends. And down here, they actually use it. If you go to like a psychologist, say, hey, I have generalized anxiety or I'm depressed or, my dad died or I have postpartum depression or whatever, just common psychological ailments, it's pretty standard down here. They'll give you a 28-day supply of these guys, and usually it's a one month treatment and you're done. So I wish they'd do more of that in the US. I think they're studying and researching that. Anyone who's used it know it works. Like, it helps you with all that stuff. So
yeah, it works with
just
PTSD, it works with anxiety, it works with they've even shown that it works with certain addictions like alcoholism and stuff like that. One of the companies that I've invested in a few years ago, I've been open about this, Field Trip, they split into two different stock symbols now. But I've known one of the founders for well over a decade, and they're doing a lot of serious research and pushing stuff through policymakers and bureaucrats, get the stuff sort of legalized in the sense where they can use it more for psychotherapy assisted psychedelic sort of treatments. I think right now they can only use ketamine here in Canada, and there's a few other states where they use ketamine, which is also pretty effective. But what they've actually done is that they've isolated the molecule that lets a trip only happen for about an hour. Because the problem when you do like a full-on heroes trip is you're out for like 5 hours, right? So they don't want to bring you in and then do like, therapy for you for 5 hours. They want you in and out of there for like an hour. There's 24 hours in a day. So they're working on quite a few important aspects of that line, which I think will be more mainstream in, the coming years. I'm pretty sure Canada is going to legalize psilocybin in the next couple of years. I mean, we've got Trudeau, he's legalized weed and pretty much everything else. So how much longer is it going to be? He's got a few more years, sitting there as prime minister. So maybe he'll push that through and do something useful with his time and increase the tax base and improve people's lives that are suffering with PTSD and stuff like that.
Rich, I got an investment question. You said that you invested in a company, based on psilocybin. Was that because, you kind of believed in the product and that, and you kind of see the way the market's going?
It's twofold. So he came at me when I was at my debt business back in 2009 when he was working on getting a weed company off the ground. And I passed. I was like, there's no way the government's going to legalize this, man. I can't see this happening. And he sold the business for like 30 mil, like him and two other partners sold it for 30 mil. So when he came at me with, hey, I'm working on this next thing, which is going to be psilocybin, and, it's looking like it's going to follow the same trajectory. All right, cool. So I threw a lot of money into it. I know the guy well. Like, I know he's got a proven track record of success. I wouldn't throw it at some random guy that I don't know. Like, I've known him for well over a decade now.
No, it was just in relation to market trends, because there's a bunch of us.
It's a trend, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us within the community that have like seriously cut back on our alcohol, and I have noticed the emergence of a lot of non-alcoholic drinks over here. Like, I went to my local beer distributor, and he used to have 2. Now he has 26. Back in Ireland, there's a whole damn section in the liquor store that was dedicated to alcohol-free gins and all of that kind of stuff. So
what's the point in having booze if it doesn't have booze in it, right?
Well,
beer doesn't even taste good.
Well, Guinness Zero isn't too bad. I mean, I like that. I drank a lot of it. But my thing is, there's got to be some technology behind removing the alcohol from beer. I want to know who those companies are, who makes it, who invented it, who provided it, because I want to invest in that, because I can see the trend that's going that way.
You think so?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. I think people are getting healthier. They're getting more health conscious.
But I mean, if you're healthier, like a pint of beer's got what, about 140, 180 calories, depending on what you're drinking.
But if you look at the calorie of if you look at the calories of non-alcoholic beer compared to alcoholic beer, it's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Calories are not the objective, right? The reduction of calories. You can get a light beer. You can drink a vodka soda, right, and have basically no calories. It's the effect of the alcohol on your system, right? I mean, it's pretty documented, right? It reduces sleep quality, increases all these other things, reduces muscle recovery after exercise. My issue back on the psilocybin is I just can't. Does anyone else feel like they have an inconsistent ability to feel physical change with any of these things that they play with from time to time? Like, sometimes
what kind of physical change?
Like dialed in, and to actually feel the effect, right? So, like,
do you mean like the effect as far as microdosing for productivity, or do you mean the effect as far as like you do a heroes trip and you have like a like a change in your life and you're thinking after the heroes trip?
The first, right? Like the
first,
small incremental changes, even something like taking a coffee, right? Or caffeine. Like, can you really, sometimes I can feel that buzz and sometimes I can't, right? And same thing with these other items. And so actually for the longest time, I've kind of even chalked it up to things like vitamins. I'm like, I can't feel anything different. Like it's not doing crap. But then certainly you ratchet up the amounts, and well, certainly you drink enough alcohol, and it is going to do. You can feel it, right? But in those smaller doses, it just feels like I'm not in touch with my body.
The guy that sort of like led me down this path basically said it's not something you do on a regular basis, maybe like every fourth day, or if you need to get into like a serious like productivity, like creativity mode sort of thing. But I mean, like the way your body metabolizes certain, you know, chemicals, like psilocybin's a chemical, it's a molecule, right? Like the way your body metabolizes certain things that you introduce into it along with what you've consumed around the time that you have it. Like one of the things that you do when you do a full-on heroes trip is you don't eat any meat for about 3 or 4 days, you know, before. Like if you're doing it properly, if you have a properly guided Sherpa, you don't eat meat for about 3 or 4 days before, the day of, and usually the day after, right? So I mean, there's different ways that you are going to metabolize what you're taking in your system, and these sort of outcomes that you're getting out of it. So a lot of guys are like bro hackers sort of things where they'll just sort of like try their own thing. And they might get some benefits out of it, and they may not, or it may wane or waver. But I mean, if you have like 2 or 3 coffees that morning, and then you smash back like a microdose of like psilocybin tea, for example, you may not have the same effect that you did 4 days earlier when you were fasting.
That's what I was going to say. If you want the effect, you fast on it. So like I'm doing coffee right now. The caffeine will outweigh the effect of the microdose because it's such a small dose, and it's dosed at, like everyone's dosage varies based on like your body mass. I'm kind of bigger, and RC, I know you're kind of a bigger guy too, so you might need a little more. You might need like a 0.35 or even like a half a gram, which that's kind of getting out of microdosing territory at that point. But for me to feel like that little micro buzz, usually I have to do it fasted. If I have like a belly full of steak, and you know this, it's the same thing with alcohol. Like before I go out drinking, I'll have like a big fatty piece of steak, and I can throw them back all night and feel fine and not be hungover in the morning. But if I drink fasted, oh boy, it's going to be a bad time. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this is that it touches on this broader concept of making these small changes in our lives to dial in, and just how easy it is to get to get the dial wrong, or to not, you know, all of this life hacking and what we're all trying to do to get our best selves, right, and chasing excellence. It feels so easy to just fly past the point of actual improvement, or to just miss it, right? Like get off the wrong exit, because there's all these little, it is a game of small tweaks, right? I mean, certainly there's some people that are listening to this call right now that need to make some big changes, but for most of us, it's these small changes. And I just find the discipline and the routine of getting those small changes right the hardest part of this game.
Yeah, like the fine tuning closer to the top is going to net smaller gains than fine tuning when you first start. Like if you're 300 pounds and you start to change your diet in like a month or two, you drop 15, 20 pounds. That seems pretty significant, right? But if you've been at like this chasing excellence, you're at the top shelf, you're already making loads of money, and you know, maybe your goal is, well, I want to kind of fine tune my, you know, my productivity. I want to see if I can, you know, help with this area of my life. And you might try something like microdosing. And it's like, okay, well, maybe it helped me that time. Maybe it didn't help me so much that time. I don't even know if I noticed it this time. It's like that whole fine tuning thing right at the top. It's like a Formula One car, right? Like all these race teams on a circuit doing Formula One races, they all have the same rules. They all have the same weight limits, the same engine capacity.
Same carburetor, same restrictor.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's like what they do in the fine tuning for the aero and the fine tuning for, I don't know, the ignition timing, or how much fuel they jam into the engine, or what, you know, what kind of valves they use. If it's Inconel, if it's titanium, if they sodium fill them and stuff like that, they'll get those small changes. But the difference between, you know, like first place and like, you know, 12th place at the end of the race might be a full lap. And those compounded effects over time, even though on the starting grid, almost all the cars are practically identical, then you also have the user that's behind the wheel too, right?
Right, and that's where the discipline and the routine comes in, right? To stick with something, because
but at the end of the day, like
compounding interest that makes the big difference when you're at anyone's level that's on this call, right? And
exactly,
that's the hardest part of this game.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like any of those F1 race cars will absolutely destroy like a Lamborghini that's made for the street, right? It's just in another league. So when you start playing at that top shelf, like the difference is that, you know, you apply might be very small, but it's a compound effect of all the differences that you make that might net a greater result at the end of the day. But it's just like, you're playing at these different levels, right?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I think that speaks to joining this group and the benefits. Rich, you've always said, if you hang around with 5 losers, you'll become the 6th.
Yeah.
So I left Ireland 25 years ago. I was back last week, and every single one of the guys, except for one who I met and hung out with and who I used to hang out with, are minimum 20 to 25 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
And it just shocked me that these guys, one guy used to be a boxer, these guys used to play football, and they're just all ridiculously out of shape. And, you're in a group like this and you start to head that way, some guys are going to pull you up and go, you need to cop onto yourself. You need to get in shape. But it just seems like once the tribe started to let things go, they all let things go. And
yeah, they start accusing you of things too, like you've had work done, you wear makeup or some bullshit like that. Like, I pulled out, because I said to my one buddy who hadn't gotten ridiculously out of shape, I pulled up a couple of pictures of you and one of the guys in the group, and I said, guess what age these 2 guys are? And he was like, get the fuck out of here. I said, yeah, it's all about standards. I said, you guys are, swilling 15 pints of Guinness on Friday and Saturday night, and then you're going getting fish and chips on the way home, and you're wondering why you're looking like this. Mm-hmm.
And again, it's
lifestyle choice.
Yeah, it's still. I don't know. I think back to this idea of chasing excellence, man. It's easy when you get off track in a big way, right? To see that you're being a chump. But once you've achieved a certain level of success that I think pretty much everyone on this call has, and Rich, probably tenfold, the motivation to keep going, right? Like I can get laid. I can go have a nice dinner, right? Like I've made it at a certain point, and I'm having a hard time having the discipline to keep pushing, even though I know that I want to, right? It's like I don't know. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that struggle, but
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. It's like, you do the work, you chase excellence, you level up, you make the money, you have the network, you buy the house, you have the car, you can travel, you've got the flexibility and freedom. It's like, okay, well, the incremental amount of work to get from that level, like stage 10 to stage 11, let's say, which is where very few people actually go to, the amount of work that might be involved. And some people look at it, it's like, I know guys are like, you know what, I'm already paying 50% of my income in taxes, so why should I go and work harder to pay more of that extra $500,000, $1 million that I'm going to make into more taxes in the system when I already live pretty good, and I'd rather have, the free time. So there's some guys that are kind of like on a, like on a build and then a cruise. It's like, I'm going to cruise for a bit. I'm going to travel a little bit. I'm going to ski some mountains. I'm going to hang out with my friends. And then they're like, I feel like chasing some excellence because, I haven't hit these certain areas of my life. Maybe I want to buy this thing over here that I haven't gotten yet, or I want to visit this place, which is going to mean this, that, and the other thing. So it's like, you always look at the horizon, right, and you can never get to it because it's a moving target. And I'm pretty sure I've made a video about this, or I've mentioned it like 1 or 2 times before. Like, you're driving along, you're just driving along in your car and you're looking at the road, and there's a horizon, there's a definite end to it, but there's more over the horizon. And it's like, you can keep chasing that horizon, you can keep going in that direction, but there's times where you kind of have to like take a look in the rearview mirror and see how far you've come to.
Well, yeah, for sure. But then that's also a trap, I feel like, sometimes, in the sense of like, I had a pretty hard upbringing, first 15, 16 years of my life. And a lot of people, and for the longest time, I never even gave it consideration. It doesn't matter, right? It's irrelevant. It is what it is, right? But I've had these people in my life that will point it out to me. And I think for different motivations. Sometimes they're pointing it out to help fuel me to keep going and look what you've done, where you came from. And other people are like, dude, take your foot off the gas, man. Like, you've already accomplished so much. But it comes and goes, just like you said, right? Sometimes there's that urge to keep going and to surge and to chase more excellence. And other times it's like, I just want to take a break, you know? And then obviously the last 2 years of my life with the divorce and COVID, destroying the business and having to rebuild it has been a freaking wild ride. But I guess my question for the group is just, once you've achieved a certain level of success, like, where does your motivation come from?
It always comes from within, man. It always comes from you. Like, you have to want it. You have to want it.
Rob, what do you think that spark is inside of you that wants it? Is it the Is it the
For me, it's always been something.
accomplishment? Is it the utility that it gives you? Like,
For me, like it's going to differ from person to person. I'm sure guys in this panel will say like they don't care about cars, or they don't care about travel, or like running off-road cars through the fucking Mexican desert, with a bunch of other entrepreneurs and having a good time. Like there's people that don't care about stuff like that. But for me, like you have to get clear on what it is that you want, sort of buckle down and then do the work so that you can apply those rewards to those goals. Right. I mean, there was a time for me when I was 16 sitting at a bus stop and looking at a 1988 IROC convertible, in white with a black top driving down the road for me. Was like, oh shit, that's, to me, like that was unachievable. And that was probably like a $15,000 or $18,000 used car in the market when I was sitting at the bus stop. And it's like, today, now I look at a Pagani Utopia and I'm like, oh, that thing's sexy as shit, man. It's like, $4 million, they're all sold out. They're not making any more of them. How the fuck do I get my hands on that now? Right. So it's like, there's always these moving targets. And then there's times where you just kind of like sit yourself down. It's like, how much faster of a car do I really need? Right. So it's kind of like it's one of those conversations that you sort of have with yourself, like, let's get real here, right? Like not everybody's going to be like the top G sort of thing, right? Like you're going to want to sort of identify what really matters to you and apply your time and resources to what really matters to you, sort of thing. I don't know, like I get where you're going, recent, but it's kind of like your philosophical sort of like question is probably going to be better answered in April when we get together and you start doing, the setup calls with Jenya, and then you get into the integration. Because I think what you need to do, what Dragos needs to do, what Jared needs to do, what 50 needs to do, like what we all need to do is going to be different, and we're going to get what we want.
Yeah.
Recent, you said a philosophical question, so that means I got to bust out my philosophical quotes. And
do it
again. Contentment is natural wealth. Nobody ever sells you contentment. They sell you things.
Discontentment sells more.
Discontentment sells. But here, if you're not satisfied with what you have, you won't be satisfied with what you want.
Yeah.
And I've said it to you a million times when I met you. You have the ability to create wealth, to drive business, to do your things. So, and there's this thing that if you're not in the 1% of the 1%, you're failing. No, sometimes you can be just happy at where you are on cruise control. You don't have to do everything, because sometimes mental health is better than wealth.
Yeah, so, for sure.
So but you don't have to do all the time. Just balance that crap out. And,
yeah, for sure. I think though that Rich says it a lot. He talks about when you look in the mirror on a scale of 1 to 10, what version of yourself? How do you say it again, Rich? What's the question?
Sorry, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best version of yourself and 1 being the worst, like where do you place yourself? Like,
do
you rate yourself close to 10?
Potential.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that I'm way underperforming on my potential, but my way under.
Where would you put yourself on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh man, like a 6, man.
Yeah, and I think most guys looking at you in your life, and even though you've gone through some turmoil and some shit and what's going on, in your family and all that sort of stuff, like most guys would look at you and be like, "Fuck, I would like." There's literally tens, hundreds of millions of people out there right now that would love to trade their lives for yours.
And that's why I call bullshit on that 6. I met you. I know you. That 6 is total another bullshit.
You're way higher.
But
guys are always tough on themselves too.
Yeah, but to Recent's point, like almost every entrepreneur that I know thinks that way. Like I've always thought that way too. Like I've always been very, very hard on myself. And I remember one time I had this consult with Philip McKernan, one of your boys, 50, from the Emerald Isles. And, he was on with me for about 30, 40 minutes. And he kind of stopped me. Like I was just going on. He was asking me questions. He goes, "When did you start becoming so hard on yourself?" And my answer to him was essentially, well, if I'm not hard on myself, I'm not going to get done what I want out of life. Right. So there might be like a contingent of what Recent's talking about, where it's like he's in the same spot. I've become a lot less hard on myself in recent years, but being a harsh critic on me and my life and my choices held me accountable to standards that I wanted to achieve. And that's one way to get what you want.
Yeah, and it's not so much about being hard on myself in the sense of like beating myself up for or not thinking that what I've done has been significant. I think actually 50 Shades has been super helpful in that, and this group's been helpful in that, in providing context and helping me feel better about what's been done. It's more about just knowing that there's way more on the table.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm leaving so much on the table, but what I have is already so much more than the average blow, that the average Joe, that I'm like, okay, all right, there's a little conflict here, right? It's like,
chill the fuck out and go for a walk then. No, seriously, dude. I mean, I've seen what you have. Just go have a walk. Get a walking stick and go wander in the fucking woods.
Yeah, and recent all the stuff you have
the subject as well about motivation. And usually, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I think my internet's a little off.
Yeah, it's usually one of two things: inspiration or desperation. The motivation to go harder than last time. The motivation.
Yeah, and I don't have any desperation, that's for sure, right? I've got all my needs and then met, but then I see Rich and I see these other guys that are at
that's inspiration.
A couple levels up, and I'm like, man, I know I could get. Don't take this the wrong way, Rich. I know I could get there. It's just I don't have the freaking discipline. So, and I'm so good now. I'm so comfortable now. It's almost like I need to like give it all away.
But it's
start over.
It's not envy.
It's not envy. No, not envy at all. They earn everything they have. That's why I can't stand libtards, man. Because Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, had a great quote just for the last couple of years. It's not greed that rules the world today. It's envy. And all these policies that want to tear people down because they've done something that you can't do or you haven't. Yeah. It's not even that you can't do, that you haven't done, right? And so they're like, well, if I can't have it, no one can have it. Envy is nasty. I don't have any envy. I have admiration, respect, appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
The single most powerful enabler for my performance and for my evolution is seeing that other people have done it.
Yeah.
Maybe something that I want, maybe a car, maybe 15% body fat percentage, whatever you want, you name it. Like if you see somebody maybe at your age or maybe younger, or I don't know, for in whatever different circumstances that they have done it, it's an enabler, right? It makes you want to get after it, because now you're not thinking that it's not possible and you're working through a void, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a bit of a follower mentality as opposed to a leading the way mentality. But for me, it was the biggest thing. Like when I see somebody else, maybe in my group of friends or somebody related, or somebody that like 6 degrees of separation, it makes me believe that the effort is possible, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got so many good examples. That's why I can't stand people who make excuses and complaints for like I said, for having a hard start about it or whatnot. Oh, they didn't know any better. Bullshit. You look around, there's plenty of good examples, even in crappy culture media right now, of people doing good work, right? And being awesome. And so it's clearly it can be done, right? There's no doubt about it, right? You can there's infinite levels above. I mean, I don't want to get all crazy, but you can look at Elon Musk, man. You can look at Mark Zuckerberg, man. The amount of possible success is just insane. Mm-hmm. But you get to a certain level of it, and the kind of the gas starts to peter out a little bit. But like you said, diminishing returns to a degree. I don't need it for my ego, right? I don't need to be as successful as Rich for my ego.
I bet there's metrics, like if we were to compare, like I bet there's a lot of metrics where you do far better in life than I do. I guarantee.
Oh man,
completely agree.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know what your childhood looked like, or maybe adversity or dealing with ambiguity, but I don't know. That's an interesting statement, Rich.
Rob or Racing, there's people have said to me,
thanks.
Piss off.
go drink your Guinness Zero, buddy.
Okay, I'm having coffee. Okay, no, listen. There's people there's like as Rich said, it's the metrics. It's the metrics of your life. And I spoke to one of our group members this week, and he hangs out with some other really high value dudes, and he said they're all ridiculously, out of shape, and everybody has something, a metric that somebody else wants. Like I've had guys who've had like way more bank than me say, I wish I had your attitude, I wish I had your outlook, I wish I had blah, and I'm like, do I have that? Am I that positive? And they're like, yeah, God, I wish I could get into that frame of mind. I said, well, whatever, I wish I had your bank account. So tough.
Yeah.
Hey, Reese, I had a question for you. I know recently you've had some major roadblocks in your life that you're on the tail end of overcoming. And sometimes I've kind of asked myself this too, that most of my life, I've always identified that there's a struggle, there's something to overcome. And then you get to the tail end of that and you realize, okay, well, I don't have any uphill battles anymore. And it feels like there's almost kind of a void. I'm wondering if that resonates with you a bit, if you've experienced that, like, okay, you're over these hurdles, you're over these roadblocks. Now what? I find that a lot of times I'm more motivated when my back's against the wall, whereas I've already gotten past the bottleneck in traffic. I have the wide horizon in front of me, and I simultaneously feel lazy and overworked at the same time. Is that something maybe you're going through as well?
Yeah, I think that could probably be part of it. I think that some people in the group have done a real service for me and been really been there and helping to just articulate how shitty of a situation I've been in the last 2 years. Which has provided some context and help for figuring my own balance out, right? Like, because I've overcome it, right? And I haven't. I've lost weight. I've gotten in better shape. I've rebuilt the company. I've survived a ridiculous divorce. Like and sometimes when you're just in the sauce and you're just doing it, you lose the context of how significant that is and also just how much mental energy that takes, right? Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I'm not launching the brand new product or chasing the new thing because I'm what is it, nerdy Star Trek reference, all power is diverted to the engines right now, sort of thing, right? So that is probably part of it. And once I have a few months under my belt of lack of that stress from those two things, who knows where I'll be? Maybe it'll manifest itself in getting some of that drive that Rich seems to have in abundance. All of his paying his dues posts that I see all the time, and
I just schedule it in and I go there and he beats the crap out of me and I have to show up and I have to pay my dues. It's like,
yeah, man.
If I don't do it, then who's going to do it?
Back to your metrics. Back to your metrics that other people have. I've said this to everyone in the group, and I said it. Anybody who's gone through what you've gone through with this turbo, see you next Tuesday, this, they would have taken a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah.
So you've got that. There's other guys in your situation now who we'll be talking about in the past tense. So,
and I think
that's a piece of excellence you've chased, achieved, gotten over that. And there's thousands of guys out there haven't. So be content with that.
Well, you've helped me come up with the phrase, or some people, ask me how I'm doing or how it's been or whatever. And sometimes I'll say, what have I said? Worse men have done better and better men have done worse. Like, it's just trying to go through that and give myself credit where credit's due, but also not use it as an excuse. Right, for why I haven't done more either. And so I don't know. I feel like everyone on the call can probably relate to that, right? Like no one on this call is at their full potential, right? Like that's just not a thing. There's always the ability to do more. So where that line is, right? How close, so like maybe Rich is at a 9.9, right? When he looks in the mirror, knowing where he could be.
I'm really flattered that you think that I'm at a 9.9, but I appreciate that, my friend.
Hey, well,
when Rich looks in the mirror, he sees a big curly head of hair. That's what he's wishing for. He's just wishing he can get to that. Listen, you mentioned 9.9 and everyone can be at their potential. Do you want your car to be buried in the red constantly? Do you want that tachometer to be in red and the car running at 8,000 RPM constantly? Or is there a time when you're going to put it on cruise control and just sit back? Because I seem to think your issue is that you're not living your full potential constantly, so therefore there's something wrong with you.
Maybe not. constantly is a strong word. You know, it's been
No,
years of shit.
I'm noticing a
Well,
trend.
divorce
It's like
divorce is taxing, my friend.
Yeah.
It takes the wind out of your sails, and it throws an anchor on everything that you try to do. Like, it is one of the most exhausting things you will ever do as a man, especially when it's acrimonious. I mean, if you set aside an acrimonious one and hope for one where everything's just tickety boo and rainbows and butterflies and pretty easy peasy, which doesn't happen very often, it's still difficult, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, don't beat yourself up too hard over where you're at today and, you know, where you wish you were at. You're doing, like I said, there are hundreds of millions of men out there right now that are listening that if knew who you are and what you've done with your life would happily trade their lives for yours.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and 50 Shades has been a big champion of that thought and statement over the last 2 years since joining the group, and I've told him this, and I'll say it, you know, and obviously that came through me joining this group, right? So Rich, you're involved in that. It's been, you know, 50 Shades has shown up for me probably more than anyone else that I've known, right?
Yeah.
More than my father. My father's called me maybe 10 times in the last 2 years. Like,
Yeah, and family just
I
doesn't
think
know.
I think
just don't
50
know
Shades
better.
called me 10 times yesterday. So no, but yeah, and you add 3 kids to the mix under the, you know, single digits on top of it that I'm trying to show up well for and not lose my you know, my shit, because if I lose my shit, then what chance do they have, right? So yeah, divorce, kids, business, COVID. Yeah.
I've got a question
there's
for
a
you.
lot, and we're coming to the tail end, like Jaren said. So a tail end of some of these big challenges, or at least this current phase of them. So yeah,
I've got a question for you, Recent.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were born again after these 2 years, after what you went through?
I mean, I'm definitely a different person. So, you know,
Philosophically, like not ayahuasca like.
I feel like it's been a progression. You know, I think that's an interesting question. I don't feel a radical shift. I felt an evolutionary shift, right? I feel like I've continued to refine my thinking and I've taken some next logical steps. I don't feel like I was headed down a path mentally. I mean, frankly, even the divorce is part of the evolution of myself. I was no longer the broken person that she could do what she needed to do for her own broken self. And I'm not even gonna put negative intent on it, right? She's broken, and when I was broken, I served a purpose for her. And as I was healing myself, it became less useful for her. And then she made the decision that I moved into the negative column for her. So it's all evolution for me more than revolution. There hasn't been like, you know, this thing that just happened. So born again feels more like, you know, more like a radical shift than an evolutionary shift.
Dragos, I like that question. I was thinking the same thing. Like at the end of my divorce, like it's kind of like a rebirth, because that whole fantastical vision of how life should be with her and that image you create in your head, you have to break up with that. And then you come out, you're like, oh, it's just me now. I can do whatever I want. And that's actually really inspiring if you look at it that way. And again, Recent, you're at the tail end. Like, look at it that way. Like, hey, the world's wide open. I can do whatever I want. Like, all this dead weight's behind me. Like, you know, whether it's rebirth or new year or whatever.
Perfect analysis, Jaron. One of the guys in this group, he joined. He's a good buddy of ours, Recent. He called me the other day. He goes, guess what? I'm going to go to New York. I'm like, why? He goes, I can do anything I want now. I was like, ding, ding, man. These bells were just going off. It was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another question for you, Recent. Did you feel like you had to kill a part of you that was no longer serving you?
Well, there's parts of me now that are that are not serving me that I would like to kill. But I don't know that I've killed anything
in the sense
through the last.
When you went through your transformation, the last 2 years, to become the person that you are now, to become the man that you are now, did you have to renounce some parts of you, kill them in a philosophical way?
Yeah, you always have to let parts of you go if you want to grow. I mean, you always have to prune to grow. That's just a part of life.
Hey, Dragos, based on your location, what's your analysis of the authorities and the law in Romania, and then what I see being minions of the Matrix and the worldwide cabal that wants to silence our brother and his
We're
brothers out there.
basically a colony of the European Union, and we're bitching ourselves out we're whoring ourselves out to both the European Union and the United States. Right now, the geopolitical waves or interests are in such a way that we want to get into the Schengen area. So basically, our panties are down and we're bent over.
Is this like a witch hunt where they're trying to earn brownie points from the West? You know, with the
Yes.
Tate brothers.
I'm not sure if it's a witch hunt, but I'm sure it's a situation of if somebody says that they should jump, they ask how high.
I've noticed, sorry, Rich, I've noticed that with Ireland as well. All these small countries that have joined the EU, they want to jump how high, and they want to be the best kid in the class. It's just ridiculous. Like
brownie points.
Yeah, I saw a notice while I was back home in Ireland recently, and it was like a public service notice at a bus stop and or at an airport, and the EU flag was at the bottom. And I stopped with my girl. I said, "Do you see anything wrong with that public service announcement and that poster?" She's like, "No." I said, "Yeah, there's no Irish flag there. There's only an EU flag." So it's the same thing's going to happen in Romania when the call comes in from Guy Verhofstadt or from Brussels. Do this, take this person out. They're going to do it.
I've actually went into a pretty heated discussion with Guy on Twitter.
Yeah,
What's
he's an unelected soy bureaucrat. He's one of the ugliest people in Europe, and he's got the worst hairstyle. But I digress.
He's actually not wrong on most things, but he is wrong on some things, and he's very far off wrong.
So I recently saw a prediction that Britain was going to rejoin the EU.
I doubt it. I mean, it's going to take a huge push from the globalist side of things. Dragos, I wanted to ask you, what's the general like consensus? Like, what's the country saying about this whole thing with Andrew and Tristan Tate right now?
Everybody's kind of like divided in the sense that you have people which have a bit of critical thinking, and they say, like, I don't know Andrew, I don't know what he's done. But a guy
he's put Romania on the map. He's done that.
Yeah.
Everyone's
kind of like how Borat put Kazakhstan on the map too.
No,
right?
But besides that, right? Like, I'm talking about people that don't know Andrew or maybe have heard of Andrew Tate, and they're like, we don't know what's happening, but something's fishy and it stinks, because that's the same playbook that they've used for everybody else that got rich and powerful in Romania, so that they could cancel them and bring them down, because it's happened to politicians and other people in Romania before.
And they've been successful with it?
It depends on what you define by success. Most of those people have exited the public domain.
So is he still in custody?
Sorry?
Is he still in? Are they still in custody? I thought I saw that they had gotten released.
For 30 days until the end of January. But
he is still in arrest because they denied the claim to freedom.
Yeah, my understanding is recently they managed to get an order to seize more assets, like his car collection and whatever assets they could get out of his property. So they're saying that they need it to fund the claims against them and to also pay damages to anybody that they might award damages to in the future. So this doesn't sound like a catch and release type of situation. It sounds like it's going to take some time to sort of deal with, but there's no question in my mind that he's going to leave. Like, he said very nice things about Romania over the last few years that I've known him anyway, both publicly and privately. And I wouldn't stay there either. Like, once he's out, then he's probably going to bounce.
Yeah, they've said very nice things about Romania even while in custody.
Yeah.
I always wonder if it's one of those things where they just want to make him irrelevant. So remember the name like Milo Yiannopoulos? He was everywhere years ago, and then they kind of did this whole thing on him, and like no one even thinks. No one thinks about him anymore. Here's one. Remember Martin Shkreli, the finance bro who bought like insulin or something and raised it some crazy amount, and he was the most evil man in the world a few years back. I didn't realize that he's out of jail. I don't even know if he went to jail. He popped up on my feed the other day. I'm like, oh, I remember that name. Watched like 2 minutes of his cast, and he's just some like gaming finance dork, and he's actually really smart, really bright. I enjoy some of his content, but he just fell off the face of the earth in terms of the public sphere. I'm wondering if that's the end game with the Tates. Like, it doesn't really matter if they get arrested or jailed or not, as long as they disappear.
I didn't quite finish my reply.
Mhm.
There's two types of people that have their views in Romania about Tate. One of the categories is the people that look at this as with a critical thinking type of view, even though they might know about Andrew or Tristan or both of them or not. But they know that usually when something like this happens and it's not some wide-backed gorilla somewhere in a fucking second-rate city in Romania pimping out some whatever you want to use, word you want to use, chicks that look like grandma. Those are the types of guys that get busted for the accusations that they have been busted on. So you got these people that look at this and say, okay, something's up. I think it's an Al Capone type of situation where they came into his house on some bogus accusations. They took the laptops, the PCs, the hard drives, everything. They went through that trying to look for something else. And now they're finding something else, and they're hitting them with the book, hoping that something will stick. And then you've got the second type of people in Romania, which are basically brainwashed idiots that watch TV and that would read news article and believe every single word, even though they look at the facts written in the article, and it's like a combination between an article written in 2015 with some other piece of information that was in 2019 and something else to prove that something happened in 2022. And it's like a total word spaghetti sandwich, and they don't have the critical thinking capacity to look through that and see what it is.
Well, I mean,
Those
that's
are the two types
people these days. Critical thinking skill. That's most people these days. Critical thinking skills has been sucked out of everybody because the powers to be don't want critical thinkers, right?
But it's a bit different in Romania. It's a bit different in Romania in the sense that even though most people don't have critical thinking, they're very skeptical of mainstream media. They're very skeptical of the government. Yes,
I am
because.
No, I'm noticing that too, Drake. I agree. For the first time ever back in Ireland, I have noticed that there is skepticism rising about the government, and I've given up waiting to get to the conspiracy theory or the conspiracy theory to come through. We all know that the authorities were sent after the Tates because of their influence on young men, and that the reason why my 14-year-old son and every one of his bros follows these guys religiously, they do not want guys getting unplugged from the Matrix, and that's why they took him. That's why they took him out. If he was
one reason why somebody would get canceled out of their Uber account.
Well, they canceled everything simultaneously.
What reason is there for that?
If that
it's a coordinated attack. It's clearly
if that doesn't prove that there's a worldwide cabal to cancel him everywhere. There was a meeting took place. It was remember what was the Mafia Council? They said it didn't exist, but we all knew it existed. And there is the globalist mafia council, as far as I'm concerned, that just said, okay, we need to take this guy out because he's unplugging young men.
Yeah, there's clearly different levels to this. Like there's a level that tech companies will operate at, because for Twitter, Facebook, Meta, all these platforms, payment processors, Stripe, PayPal, Airbnb, for all these guys to coordinate this very quickly within a 24 to 48 hour period, they clearly have a table somewhere or a hotline where they can deal with stuff like this, right? Like there's different levels to the way that the Matrix operates. Yeah,
it's like an invasion, ground, air, and sea, and they have to be coordinated.
It used to be that those sorts of actions wouldn't happen until there was proof. Now it's just allegations. And I'm not so sure that it's because he's unplugging young men and because he's speaking truth. I think it's because he's offending the weak betas out there that have had success, and they just take personal offense to it. They just don't like the guy because they make he causes them to look in the mirror and realize what chumps they actually are. And there's nothing more dangerous, right, than a weak man, right, as Jordan Peterson says. And so
there's nothing more dangerous than a weak man with power.
Yes,
and we have lots of weak men with power, and so they see someone like Tate, and they don't even care that he's unplugging these young men because they don't even care about the young men. In either way, they're registering that thought. They just don't like how he makes themselves feel, and so
I think a great example of a weak man, as you said, a dangerous, powerful weak man, but they're also the most vengeful, and they build it up over years. And I think one of those guys is Adam Schiff. You can tell that guy was a soy beta, got beat up as a kid. The quarterback probably plowed his sister, and the guy is carrying it around for effing years. And like the nerds who didn't get power when they were young absolutely resent people who were able to wield it. And
these are the guys 50 that usually go into law, right? Like one of the common sound bites that you'll hear from them is that the pen is mightier than the sword, because they realize that they cannot wield a sword, but they realize how much power the pen has when you use the law too, right?
The activist attorneys.
I mean, if there's anything as far as a lesson here, it's don't fly too close to the sun. And I think that he had probably done that, which is why he's in the situation that he's in right now.
He got too big too fast.
Rich, I think you need to write that quote down. Those who say the pen is mightier than the sword say so because they cannot wield the sword.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a common theme. Like, I know a lot of lawyers. I mean, I was married to one, right?
Yeah. The prosecutor that's on Tate's case is also one of the prosecutors of the people trafficking director, or somebody in charge. I'm missing the word because it's legalese in Romania. And for him, it's a good way to advance in his career by getting notorious in very public cases.
Is human trafficking huge in Romania like it is in the U.S.? Like, a lot of people don't realize in the U.S. I read this recently that we have more slaves now than we did at any time pre-Civil War, just because it's so
I would be surprised
abundant.
if those charges stick. I think if anything, they might find something on the other end when it comes to capital being produced and how it was produced, whether or not it complied with law. I don't know. I mean,
it's a practice the world over. There's an attorney general in the state of New York, and she's going after Trump for the exact same reason. She just wants to make a name for herself.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
so, and you know what? I hate to say it. Well, I think Top G is bigger than Trump. So this prosecutor is going to make himself famous worldwide.
Yeah.
You always have to hate someone, and Trump's out of the limelight now.
You always have to hate someone that's right. You always have to have an enemy. The sad thing is the human trafficking that he's being accused of, which is obviously, I'm 95% sure that's just totally bogus, right? I always have some reserved, but what people don't realize
you have to make a distinction.
It's only a business because of weak men. Strong men don't go to these drugged out, held against their will prostitutes. I mean, come on. It's a bunch of simps and betas and weak men out there that fuel that whole economy. I mean, it's just nuts, man. And weak men are destroying the world right now.
That's what I've always wondered. I tell guys, like, for dating type advice, like, get 2,000 followers on Instagram and have a solid Instagram and see what happens. Like, you will have girls coming into your DMs. And I've experienced that. Any guy I've told that to, where they've done the work on the online dating type side, they've experienced that. So now amplify that by just a multitude. And then you get someone like Tate. This he's the most famous guy on the planet right now. Do you really think that he has to traffic chicks, or that he has to drug chicks or abuse them? Or are they lining up? He's probably beating them away or beating them off with an ugly stick. Like, get out of here. I've got shit to do.
I'll say this. I mean, like, every interaction that I've had, whether it was public in a podcast or private in conversations that I've had, I've always been left with the opinion that they're true gentlemen when it comes to that. So again, I would be surprised if any of that sticks.
Most guys that get laid, or guys that manage chicks, are true gentlemen. Like, if they did the webcam thing, you're not going to have girls work for you. And
whether or not it complied with law, I don't know. Right.
Yeah, that's
You
a
have to
different
make
question.
the distinction here between the people trafficking, what it is in the United States, and what it is in Romania, because they have slightly different definitions. Where in the United States, people trafficking is usually getting people from Mexico and taking them over the border and bringing them into the U.S. Over here, if you talk to a chick and you tell her, I'm going to marry you when you come to Romania, and then you have her on OnlyFans when she comes to Romania, even though she does it willingly, it's considered people trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Because you told her that you would marry her or begin a relationship with her if she did something for you. So it's a bit different. Like the definition is very different. Also, for example, they would have security, right, at the house where the chicks were, because obviously 4, 5, 6, whatever beautiful chicks staying in the same house attracts some attention, and you want some security for them because that's what you are doing. Basically, you are providing them a carefree environment and a carefree world, right? This is the understanding, right? And if you have security there, it's like, oh, but you're not protecting them. You're keeping them from running away, right? You see, they're spinning it, everything in a different
did
direction.
Andrew actually run did he manage? Because I know he talks about how he would manage women to help with only.
No, they've openly stated, even on my podcast, there was like 75 gals that they run at one time.
Yeah, they did the camp
that
thing
they
even
were
before
helping to
OnlyFans,
manage
didn't they?
their operation.
What's the question?
So, so the Tate brothers did manage performers on OnlyFans. Is that a true statement?
If they were managing them personally?
No, was he running a business where he would help to maximize their income, show them how to do it? Because I remember seeing some clips where he talked about like having dudes do the typing because they actually knew what to say to hook people in versus having the girls do it. Did he actually run that business?
I cannot talk on what's happening now because he never invited me to his home, and I don't know what his setup is, honestly. Like, I see the types of statements that he does online, things that you could see by yourself watching some podcasts. And that's as much as I know from now. I know that back in 2017, 2018, where this was still at the beginning, he used to run, he innovated or invented this situation or this setup where he would have the chick on a webcam site and then door next door, and he would be on his laptop actually chatting to the people instead of her. So like the picture is with her, but
so he has
chatting.
managed OnlyFans models, right? Just like a
yeah.
model.
This was from 2017, 2018 though.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that to say that he was breaking the law. I'm just clarifying that he has been in the business of managing OnlyFans models.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of like we're getting into some speculation stuff, and it sounds like a little bit of gossip at this point. So I kind of want to move on.
It's also an ongoing investigation, and I don't want to like trip some wires or something.
Yeah, look, the truth has a way of always revealing itself. So give that some time, and the facts will become clear and obvious. Hopefully,
unless you're
what I can tell you. What I can tell you is that out of the
unless you're Epstein,
what I can tell you is that out of the 6 chicks that were initially in this lawsuit against him, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 left.
Well, I guarantee there's some money going to them for them to stick around at this point. Anyway, guys, let's wrap it up at this stage. If you guys want to tune in Monday night, I'm doing a show on divorce. I got the family lawyer, Jonathan Noble, joining me. I also have a course on navigating your own divorce, which is now available, which I'll talk about more during that show. Visit my website at richcooper.ca. You can find Jaron online. Instagram is probably the best place to start, and he's got his links to his social and his YouTube channel. The other gents are more anon and kind of just hanging off as members of the 1%. If you want to learn more about that, pinned in the top comment, there's some useful links. We will see you guys very soon. Have an awesome weekend.